On a quiet but consequential Sunday in early December, with Chicago bathed in the subdued calm that comes only when the Bears are idle and the city's collective heart rate dips a few beats below its typical game day pulse, an unfamiliar sense of ease settles over a fan base, unaccustomed to spending this part of the NFL calendar evaluating playoff mathematics instead of draft positioning. And yet, that is precisely the atmosphere blanketing the region as the Bears, improbably 9-3, and sitting firmly as the NFC's number 2 seed with a legitimate shot to ascend to number 1 by nightfall, enter a moment of season-defining clarity, an inflection point shaped by their own work, but also by a constellation of developments around the league that, one after another, continue to tilt subtly in their favor. And while Chicago enjoys the rare luxury of watching others sweat for position, the surrounding NFL landscape remains anything but quiet, beginning with a significant blow to the Green Bay Packers, whose starting defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt, one of the anchors of a defensive front built around explosive pass rush talent, has suffered what team sources expect to be a season-ending ankle injury. A turn of events that removes a highly productive interior disruptor with 4 sacks this season and 15.5 over the past 3 years from the Packers' rotation just as they prepare for 2 matchups against Chicago in the span of 3 weeks. A scheduling quirk that amplifies the impact of Wyatt's absence and leaves Green Bay scrambling to reconfigure an already thinned defensive interior with Carl Brooks dealing with lingering injury issues, and the coaching staff likely forced to lean more heavily on young linemen like Kobe Wooden and depth contributors such as Warren Burks and Stackhouse, shifting additional pressure onto the productive edge tandem of Micah Parsons and Rashan Gary, who now become even more central to the Packers' efforts to contain a Bears offense anchored by a rejuvenated run game and an offensive line that has steadily improved its cohesion as the season has progressed. And while Wyatt was never elite as a run defender, a trait that, in isolation, might marginally benefit Chicago's ground-heavy offensive approach, his absence removes a disruptive interior force whose pass-rushing ability frequently dictated opposing protections, which in turn creates a different kind of opportunity for a Bears offense, likely to face intensified edge pressure as the Packers attempt to compensate by scheming Parsons toward the Bears' young tackle Ozzie Trapillo, who has shown flashes of promise in his limited starts but remains, by virtue of his inexperience, a logical target for Green Bay's most dynamic defensive threat, even as the absence of Wyatt may allow Chicago to adjust protections more flexibly and allocate additional resources toward neutralizing edge rush. And while no team celebrates the injuries of another, the reality is that the Bears, like every NFL franchise, must evaluate each shift in the competitive landscape with clear-eyed pragmatism. And the loss of Wyatt constitutes a tangible swing in Chicago's favor at a pivotal moment in a division race that has narrowed into a 2-team duel between the Bears and Packers, both of whom have created significant separation from a Detroit Lions team whose season has taken on an increasingly muddled character, further complicated this week by the surprising and ultimately unsuccessful comeback attempt of veteran All-Pro center Frank Ragnow, who, days after stunning the league by announcing his intention to return from retirement in an effort to bolster Detroit's injury-riddled offensive line, failed his physical due to a grade 3 hamstring strain, an outcome that not only reignites questions about the physical toll that led to Ragnow's initial retirement, but also raises doubts about whether he had fully assessed his physical readiness before attempting a return, creating an impression of a player whose desire to help his former team may have outpaced the condition of a body worn down by seasons of grueling trench combat. And for the Lions, who have struggled to recreate the offensive rhythm and structural consistency they enjoyed under former offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, now departed, and whose defensive identity has also shifted in the absence of coordinator Aaron Glenn, leading head coach Dan Campbell recently to reclaim play-calling duties from John Morton. Ragnow's failed return represents a missed opportunity not only to strengthen a young and uneven interior line, but also to restore a measure of leadership and stability to a locker room, navigating a season increasingly characterized by near misses, narrow escapes, and an unmistakable loss of the emotional cohesion that defined their recent rise, leaving the Bears, who will close their regular season schedule against Detroit in Week 18, with one fewer challenge in a matchup that could, depending on how the next 6 weeks unfold, carry meaningful seeding stakes. And as Chicago's attention shifts from divisional news to the broader tapestry of Sunday's action, Four games in particular loom as critical components of the Bears' potential march towards securing either the NFC's top seed or the most favorable possible wildcard fallback scenario, beginning with the Los Angeles Rams' trip to Carolina, where a Panthers upset, unlikely as it may be given the Rams' status as comfortable 10.5-point favorites, would vault the Bears into the NFC's number one position, heading into the final stretch of the season. A remarkable possibility considering that Carolina, a team defined by inconsistency and recently humbled in a listless Monday night performance against San Francisco, has nevertheless demonstrated an unpredictable capacity for punching above its weight, including an earlier season upset over these same Packers, followed by the far more plausible upset opportunity in Cleveland, where the Browns, buoyed by a suffocating defense led by the relentless Myles Garrett, and preparing to face a San Francisco team whose offensive line beyond all-pro left tackle Trent Williams is vulnerable to interior pressure. Enter a game where cold, wet conditions could meaningfully affect 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy, whose performance historically dips in poor weather, while Browns defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, who holds an extraordinary 8-1 career record against Kyle Shanahan-led offenses, adds a layer of schematic intrigue to a matchup that could devolve into a low-scoring, attritional contest likely to hinge on field position, turnovers, and the modest but stabilizing play of rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders, whose steady debut last week injected a sense of competitiveness into a Cleveland offense that had been searching for direction. Meanwhile, in Seattle, the Bears should root for the Minnesota Vikings, now 4-7 and functionally out of playoff contention, to pull off a difficult upset over an 8-3 Seahawks team that remains a direct competitor in both division winners seeding and hypothetical wildcard tiebreaker scenarios, even if Minnesota enters the game with undrafted quarterback Max Brown, making his first start against a Mike Macdonald defense that has feasted on inexperienced signal callers. And finally, the Buccaneers matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, where Tampa Bay, listed as only a 3.5-point home favorite and dealing with a battered Baker Mayfield, must fend off an Arizona team finding unexpected competence under quarterback Jacoby Brissett. A game that, while less central to Chicago's immediate calculations, still factors into longer-term considerations about potential playoff opponents, with the Bears likely preferring a postseason bracket that routes them toward less imposing teams like Carolina or Arizona, rather than a healthier, more dangerous Buccaneers squad. And all of this unfolds as Chicago, resting yet vigilant, enjoys a moment few would have predicted merely months ago. A December Sunday where the Bears, playing with confidence, continuity, and a newfound ability to capitalize on both their strengths and the shifting circumstances of a league where fortunes can pivot on a single injury, a single upset, or a single afternoon scoreboard, find themselves not only in the heart of the playoff picture but in control of their own destiny, part of a season that has revived hope, reshaped expectations, and rekindled the sense throughout the city that something rare is happening, something transformative, something building toward a finish that could alter the trajectory of the franchise in ways that felt impossibly distant not long ago.